Okay, I'm back today with a request for a video that I've had. I've had this before, actually, very similar thing before, and I thought, okay, this is a good time to do it. Which is, how do I write my name? How do I construct my name the way I do it? How do I build the letters? How would I put those letters together? Now, those of you who've already had a go at this, graffiti generally, I mean, will know that straight letters are not as easy as they first look. There was a great, I don't know if you know Hornbray of the Stick Up Kids. There was a great little exchange one time online where a guy had come in and he saw that Boogie and Hornbray, they were doing this thing called Homboog for a while, where they were doing collaborative pieces. They did some fantastic pieces in that time. I believe some commercial and some just sort of pure artistic collaborations. I think the work was fabulous anyway, really, really good. I'll see if I can source some pictures of it to stick up here while I'm talking about this. So, Homboog. Now, anybody who knows Boogie's style knows that Boogie does straight letters. And this guy, this spectator who'd seen it, come in and said, "Oh, finally, a piece that I could probably pull off myself." And Hombre had come in on the conversation and said, "What, you think that because they're straight letters that you could just do them?" And he said, "Listen, straight letters are the hardest thing of all. To be able to pull off really nice straight letters is really, really tricky, because you've got nothing to hide behind. There's just nothing except those letters. This is I know I quote him sometimes. You've heard me quote him before. This is Bando's point. Bando of ex of Crime Time Kings and the Chrome Angels. His point was that letter construction must be able to stand alone. Your letters must be able to stand alone. I'll find some examples of Bando's work to show you as well what he meant by that. And that is one of his precepts, which is a very good one. With all that in mind, how do I do mine? Because mine are straight letters, and always with a straight letter set, you kind of think, well, you know, you could dash that off, right? I probably could dash it off now, but that's because I've been doing graffiti for 35 years. That's why I could dash it off now. I haven't always been able to dash it off, and it took a long time to arrive at this stuff. So I'm going to try to sort of deconstruct a little bit as well. I'm going to go around the houses a little bit with this one to illustrate what I mean. So first off, if I give the example of what I normally do, this is what I normally do, this kind of style. And if you look at the letters, often they're slightly top heavy, or certainly a couple of them are top heavy, obviously top heavy, notably the C and the E. What do I mean by top heavy? Well, I'll go into that in a second. The U and the T are sort of congruent with the C and the E. Often you'll find this as well. When you do your name, you'll find that there are letters within your name that are more important. Some people make a case for the fact that your tag only really needs to carry one letter that is very stylish, and you can just about get away. This is like heresy, isn't it, really? But it's true. One letter that needs to be super stylish, and the rest can be quite sort of, you know, just fit in around it. There's a lot of truth to that, actually. I'm sure some people will shoot me down in flames for saying it. You're not supposed to say things like that, really, but it's absolutely true. You know, if you've got a 4-letter name and you can make all 4 letters really stylish, then good for you. Do it. But you don't necessarily need to. Anyway, let's get back to this idea of top heavy. I know I've talked about this before. I'm talking about it again. So let's make a few boxes to illustrate what I'm talking about. So 4 boxes. You've seen this done before, right? Break it down to a grid like this. Now you get this sort of thing in letter construction. See where I'm going with this? There's a nice C for you. Well, a nice-ish C for you. There you go. You can tell what it is anyway. There's a C. And it's constructed using these sort of grid lines. These even grid lines. 2 along there. 2 vertical, 2 horizontal, like that. In a space like that. I could have made the box squarer, which would have made the C even squarer. I could have squashed it up a little bit. I chose not to. I just wanted to keep them uniform so you can see what I'm about to do. Now, if I want to sort of change this letter, all I need to do is change the grid lines, really. I could change them to something more like this. So all I do is I change my grid lines, change the construction. Now, that's where the negative space goes, just there. So using this construction, I get something like that. Now that is a very top-heavy letter, and this bar is very naturally thinner, these fatter. But can you see how I've done that? That's just using them guidelines just there. Very, very easy. To give you another example, let's work on the opposite sides. Same thing. There we go. There we go. That gives us another top-heavy letter, but this time this side is much heavier and this side is much thinner. One more example of this. Let's give a nice bottom-heavy letter. I know you get the point by now, but I'm labouring it because the more you labour the point, the more likely it is to sink in. What do they say? Repetition is the mother of invention. Is that right? I didn't have a great education at school, so don't quote me. There we go. That is just using these guidelines. Very simple guidelines, a very simple grid system of 9 squares or 2 vertical and 2 horizontal guidelines. So all I'm doing is I'm shifting. And if you saw my last video, or if you didn't see my last video, actually go and watch that about negative space, about how basically I sort of, I try not to concentrate too much on the structure of a letter, more about where I'm going to stick the negative space, because that really affects shape and form and size. So there you go. You've got 4 different examples of a C there. Now I've used very rigidly defined, like for instance, these are all like the same size, the box, and they're all roughly the same kind of, roughly the same width, same height, but I can differ that. Those of you who've used Photoshop know if you use the scale function, if you use the transform function and you use scale, then you can start stretching that out. You could stretch that down to there. So suddenly you get that. You see where I'm going with this? So you go from a very round C to a nice long ovular one, ovoid. You do the same with that one, same with that one, same with that one. I'm not going to do it all now because I'm going to get onto the actual piece and how I go about doing it. But you can see how you can, if you're somebody, particularly someone who's starting out, but this is equally valid for if you're an expert, if you feel a bit stuck, if you're very advanced in graph, you know, if you find you've got into a rut around letters, knock out a grid for yourself. Just start to sort of stretch them about and play with them a little bit, see what you can do. Because all of us, by the way, get stuck in a rut every so often, and it can be nightmarish, particularly if you work as a professional. I know a lot of people who work as professional artists, and you get stuck in a rut and you burn out, and you have to keep doing it because it's how you make your money. But your love and passion of the work can just disintegrate overnight. It's horrible. It's really, really horrible. So to do something new, to change it up, is always essential. So anyway, on to the piece itself. So how do I write my name? So what I do, I've got a good idea already about how I like the letters to look. I like a top-heavy thing, a top-heavy form. So I often start with like a sort of, and I avoid like that. Now, again, if I wanted to make it a bit more like our first example of a C there, then I'd stick the negative space in the middle there. And there you go. I've got a nice little ovoid C. However, I don't really go too nuts on that. I do every so often because, hey, you've got to change it up every now and again. But what I tend to do is I drop it further in the bottom like that, because I like a nice top-heavy letter. Nice top-heavy letter. I like to stick a little flat extension on the back as well, because it just gives me the option, if I want to stick a little doodad on the back, or an arrow of some kind, big chunky one, you know, then I can stick it there. So that's something I do quite a lot. Now, next in, I talked a lot yesterday about negative space and how I deal with negative space. I like to close up negative space wherever possible. And I often, if you look at my tag, so I tend to tag sort of very long and thin. It's quite old school the way I do my tag. I mean, literally, my tag hasn't really changed in, oh gosh, 30 odd years, probably more. I mean, literally, people were tagging like that in the late 80s, and my tag hasn't really changed in all that time, because I just like the aesthetics. I like the aesthetics of that kind of thing. Now, if you look at the way that I sort of write my name, it's very similar to that. I favour a sort of a longer letter. I favour them nice and long. So that kind of thing. There you go. Stick the, now that you can see that C is touching that U. And that will be the same for all these letters. They're going to be tight. I'm going to close up the space. With the T, you'll have to learn how to do this for yourselves as well in the composition of your own name. For a long time, I used to struggle with the T, because the T is a tricky one. Because what you get with a T, where can I put this that I can show you? I'll tell you what, I'll put it bottom left so you can see. T, you have a very obvious problem, right? In that you've got a lot of negative space with a T that may not be very congruent with the letters around it. All the negative space in there, that's a lot of negative space. And if you're doing a piece where you want to kill the negative space, you're going to have to work out an ingenious way to kill that negative space. Now, over the years, I've sort of worked it out for myself how I do it. I do it like this. This is how I do it. I get the T up there, bring it in there. I join it to the U just there. You've probably all seen me do this already. And there I have a T. with a tiny amount of negative space just there. Next up, very easy for me to do an E and kill the negative space because I can just slap it in under there. Now I've got all kinds of choices. I can overlap that letter over the edge of the T there. I could run it underneath the T, whatever I like. I can use small case, lowercase, uppercase. I'm going to use lowercase for this. Make it a nice top-heavy lowercase E. And again, you know, this stick here, I can do whatever I like with it, really. Sometimes I run it up there. Sometimes I widen it, blow it out. Sometimes I just truncate it down here. I will kill it just there. There you go. So what I'm trying to do as I'm doing the piece is I'm trying to capture a bit of movement in the letters as well. Most notably, I guess, the T. Again, this is the thing about not all your letters have to dance, you know, but if you can make one of them dance, it sort of makes it look like they're all dancing. And that T has probably got the most amount of movement in it. Now, what I also like to do, this is not everybody's cup of tea, but I like to kill the join lines because I find it more effective. There we go. So there we have that. Now, you may have noticed that I often don't use a 3D anymore. I use 3D if I do a slightly more techie piece, but on this style, I don't 3D it. I'll do a drop shadow instead because I prefer it. I prefer it to be flat. Nice straight letter piece. I prefer the flatness of it. I just do. That's a choice. You know, it's just a personal sort of aesthetic choice. Because what I would do if I was to go on to illustrate that piece is I'd put a nice sort of cloud around it there, and you know, that would give me a nice sort of colour contrast to whatever colour that I done this in this one, the letters themselves, and then I do the shadow would be a darker tone of whatever the cloud was, and then I might do some sort of lighting effects on it, and you know, highlights and so on and so forth. That's how I now illustrate my name generally. And all these guideline steps, all these must be taken into account. It's years of work that goes into making things very simple. Everything looks as if it's sort of really, I remember years ago, right? I visited a friend, and he had a big, he had quite a famous gallery over in West London, because he was one of the I won't say it was, because I don't know if it's right to really mention his name, but he was one of the founders of what's called Brit Art, the Brit Art movement in this country. And he showed me some of the pieces he had in his collection, and some of the pieces that he was storing for artists that he helped to exhibit. And there was this one piece that I was fascinated by because it looked like a tag. It was a grey canvas. It was also owned by somebody very famous. I won't name drop, but anyway, it was a grey canvas that had been painted like a solid block of grey, and then it looked like a big yellow and red tag on it. And you know, nowadays when you get a mixture of paint or ink and a big fat marker, and you get a mixture of paint as it comes out, it looked like that. And I said, oh, wow, that's amazing. Is it a piece of graph? Is it a grapher who's done that? Is it a writer? And he said, no, look closely. Look closely. He said, they're brush strokes. What looks like big sort of fat marker strokes, it's actually tiny, tiny brushes he's created. He's taken weeks and weeks, maybe months, to create with tiny brush strokes. I was like, oh my, that's amazing. It looks like he's just dashed it off in 2 seconds, like we do with a tag. But this guy had taken months to do it. My point is that we take years to do something that looks as if you dashed it off in 5 minutes. That's the whole idea, really. It's smoke and mirrors. I've known so many graphers who have used this sort of artistic concept, which isn't talked about nearly enough, which is you work for years and years and years and years to do something that looks as if anybody could do it and that you could dash it off really quickly. And then when somebody actually comes to do it, they discover just how difficult it is. Anyway, there you go. That's all I have to say on this one. If you have any questions, queries, requests for videos, anything like that, then drop it in the comments, and we'll have a powwow and see if I can answer your questions, and or do a video of your choice. But to any beginners, think about this. Think about this grid system. Think about how you can stretch your letters out. What is top heavy? What is bottom heavy? The sides, the sides of your letters, how you can thicken them or thin them, and this sort of stuff. You don't need to do a grid every time if you don't need to, but it might help you in the beginning to do it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that, guys. Back for more soon.